Welcome to OpenNMS 101 again, Module 9, Page Sequence Monitoring. The Page Sequence Monitor, PSM, lets OpenNMS monitor web applications. Beyond testing a web application with a single URL, it can also test a path through a web application. The relevant OpenNMS documentation can be found in the Horizon Reference Docs under Service Monitors, Page Sequence Monitor. The path to creating a PSM is simple. Create the detector and then create the service monitor in polling-configuration.xml. The tutorial PSM will be applied to Horizon. As background for creating the detector, access Horizon using the localhost :8980/OpenNMS URL. After entering the URL, it changes to localhost :8980/OpenNMS/login.jsp. To add the detector, click on Admin Configuration. Click on Manage Provisioning Requisitions. Edit the Self-Monitor requisition by clicking on the pencil button on the same line. Click on the Edit Definition button, then click on Add Detector. The detector's name will be OpenNMS-PSM, and the detector class will be HTTP. The first parameter is port, and the value is 8980. The second and final parameter is URL, and the value is /OpenNMS. Click on Save. Scroll down to verify the detector exists. Click on Save, then Return. Synchronize across all nodes. Click on Return. Then click on Info, Nodes, and scroll down the localhost front page. The OpenNMS-PSM detector has worked on both interfaces. The PSM monitor is configured in the file OpenNMS etc poller-configuration.xml. Module 8 detailed the configuration of a service monitor. The OpenNMS-PSM service configuration will be added to the tutorial package. The service configuration consists of PSM parameters described in the Horizon reference documentation under Service Monitors, Page Sequence Monitors, Configuration and Use. After configuring the service monitor, a class will be attached to the service at the end of poller-configuration.xml. As mentioned before, the process was covered in Module 8. PSM parameters consist of PSM-specific parameters, the common service monitor configuration parameters, and page parameters. Each will be described when used in the tutorial. To add the OpenNMS-PSM page sequence monitor, change to the OpenNMS etc directory and edit the file poller-configuration.xml. Look for the tutorial package. Recall that the tutorial package applies to IP 127.0.0.1. Scroll down and add the OpenNMS-PSM service definition just before the package downtime model. The service name is OpenNMS-PSM, which matches the detector name. The interval is 30,000 milliseconds or 30 seconds. This is a user-defined service, and it will be on. The timeout is 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds, and the retry count is 1. These are the common configuration parameters. The parameter element with key value page-sequence contains the page-sequence element. The page-sequence element will contain the page sequences to run. Recall that localhost :8980/OpenNMS redirected to localhost :8980/OpenNMS/login.jsp. This will be the first page in the page sequence. One method to determine whether or not the page loaded correctly is to look for a specific value in the web server response. View the page source and search for the value login, which one can link to the button label. The value login is in the page source, and it will do to verify that the page is loaded. Be aware that some page sequences will be more complicated. The first page element can now be defined. The path /OpenNMS/login.jsp is the relative URL to call in the request. The port is the port to use when connecting. The success match is the text to look for in the response body. This is a regular expression matched against every line and is considered a success at the first match, and then sets the service with this monitor as up. The success match is login, all in uppercase. The virtual host is the virtual host field in the HTTP header. With this, there is enough information for the page sequence monitor. Scroll down to the bottom of poller-configuration.xml. Associate the OpenNMS-PSM service with the poller.monitors.PageSequenceMonitor class. Save and close the file. Having added a monitor to poller-configuration.xml, it is necessary to restart OpenNMS. Use System Control Restart OpenNMS.Service to do this. Test the status of OpenNMS at some point. OpenNMS is up and running. Return to Horizon and recycle to re-log in. After re-logging in, the localhost front page is displayed. After it refreshes, scroll down a bit and note that the OpenNMS PSM service is up on the 127.0.0.1 interface and is not monitored per the limitation of the Poller tutorial package on the 192.168.159.105 interface. As an interesting aside, the recent events include two specific events to the OpenNMS-PSM service. The first indicating that there was a service outage, and the second indication that the outage has been cleared. This is part of the OpenNMS restart process, as polling is restored before the web server. While a web page monitor is useful, PSM stands for Page Sequence Monitor. Add the OpenNMS login and logout pages to the OpenNMS PSM service. The login page will be attempted with the user Rose and the password flowerchild. Still to be determined is how to automate passing that information to Horizon. The logout page conditions will be determined. How can the monitor log out of Horizon? As an aside, never use the admin account for testing. Enter the username and password to log into Horizon, but before hitting the login button, start the browser debugger by pressing F12. This is with Chrome. Open the Network tab and clear it out. Now press Login. A correct login leads to /OpenNMS/index.jsp. Increase the network debugging screen space. Scroll up to the first line in the output. That line should be J_spring_security_check. Click on J_spring_security_check. In the Headers tab, the requested URL is /OpenNMS/J_spring_security_check, and the request method is post, and the status code is 302. Click on the Payload tab. J_username is Rose, and J_password is flowerchild, the password. This should be enough data for the login page. These are the login elements for clarity. And this is what the login page element will look like. Before logging out as Rose, clear the network debugger. Shrink the debugger space. Log out as Rose. Notice the final page is /OpenNMS/login.jsp. Increase the debugger space. Scroll to the top and click on J_spring_security_logout. In the Headers tab, the requested URL is /J_spring_security_logout, and the request method is post, and the status code is 302. This should be enough for the logout. These are the logout elements for clarity. And this is what the logout page element will look like. This is the OpenNMS-PSM service definition with the login and logout page elements. Since the service has already been defined, The configuration change can be effected by rereading the poller-d configuration. From the command line, reload the poller-d configuration by running send-event.pl reload daemon config poller-d. Return to the localhost front page, focusing on the surfaces, and note that OpenNMS-PSM is green. The PSM is working. Add the event page to the sequence. Logging in as rows and beginning from the horizon front page. Make sure the network debugging is on and cleared. Click on Status Events. Increase the debugging view. Scroll up to the top line, Index, and click on it. Click on the Headers tab. The URL is /OpenNMS/event/index. The method is GET. The status code is 200. Click on the Response tab and look for something interesting. Use Outstanding and Acknowledged Events. These are the event elements for clarity. This is what the event page element would look like. This is the OpenNMS-PSM service definition with the page element event included. Save and close the file. Run send-event.pl reload daemon config poller-d to reread the poller-d configuration. Return to the localhost front page and note that the OpenNMS PSM monitor is still up. Click on the monitor label under the 127.0.0.1 interface. Look at the page sequence definition and note each of the pages: the login screen, logging in, opening the event page, and logging out. To review, OpenNMS can walk through a series of web pages. The sequence should be in the order a user might follow: access to the home page or login screen, login, various intervening pages, and then a logout. If the PSM logs in, it should log out. The browser's debugger can help build the PSM page element. The URL, port, method, return code, and page text can all be found with the browser's debugger. Do not use an admin account in the PSM. OpenNMS can do more with PSMs. For example, store metric data. See the documentation. Coming up, Module 10, Passive Status Keeper.